This video is about how to run the clock. First I'll talk about winding, which I did a little bit in the other video as well. So you can see there are two strings that hang down from the center shaft of the clock. The thicker string there is attached to the weight that's down near the floor right now, and then there's this string here, and this is for winding. So you pull down on this string here while lifting up at the same time. You should probably lift up a little on the larger string that the weight is hanging from. I'll just demonstrate that a little bit now. This weight here, this little weight on the pulley, will be just packed separately in a little bag that I will attach to the template. So that just hangs on this loop of the thinner string. So you pull down on the front string there where it hangs from where it's attached to the center shaft. Pull down on that, lift up on the other one, and try to lift it, raise this one up so that it winds evenly there on the center shaft. I'll show you in a minute. Okay, you can see how it's wound around that center shaft nice and evenly. If you lift up too much on that cord and you get slack in it, then it'll wind unevenly, which shouldn't be a problem really. It just doesn't look as good. So I'll wind this all the way up. All the way up to there to get maximum running time of the clock before the weight gets down to the floor again. So that's winding. And then setting the hands. They are just out there on the front here of the clock. You can just spin that minute hand around to set the time. You can go backwards too. Sometimes it turns this gear back a little bit backwards. You can see a little like that. It's not too bad though. You can just grab it too. If you want to run the hands backwards very far, you can just grab this wheel. That's not going to hurt it. So that's how you set the hands. The hour hand is just attached to this other hollow shaft that's tapered. So it's possible if it gets bumped, maybe it can come loose like that, which isn't a problem. Just grab the gear tight so you're not torquing it one way or the other too much, and then you can wiggle this hand and push it back on. If you get it kind of lined up for like 6 o'clock, like that, or 12 o'clock, then you know for sure it's aligned just right with the other hand. So here they're showing 12 o'clock, and once that's on tight, then you can set the time just by turning the minute hand like that. And then there are a couple of possible adjustments on the pendulum. One of them is the speed adjustment, which is this piece down at the bottom hanging from that point. You can change the rate that this swings, the period, by you just grab this like right here, turn this to the left like that, and that'll loosen it. And then if you go, I'm going to keep my thumb here so I mark where I had it before, but if you move it up and then turn it to the right to tighten it, that will make it run slower. If you bring it down, it makes it run faster. And just a few millimeters of a change will make quite a bit of difference with the speed of the clock. So again, when you get it in position where you want it, just grabbing this pendulum shaft and turn it to the right to tighten it, like that. And then there's a balancing adjustment possibility here that it may never need to be done, except probably initially when you put the clock up, you may want to do it. Now, I had mentioned before there are markings. There are two little marks on the back of this shaft to show where these should go, or at least where they should start in that position. And then the way you know that the clock that the pendulum is balanced properly is by starting it up, and then you look at the two legs where it catches here, and you kind of note how high that lifts away right there from the outer edge of this wheel, and it's about maybe 2 centimeters. And then compare that with the other one. Bring this up a little. Then look at the other one up here, and they should be about the same. That's about 2 centimeters. If one of them swings like way high like that, and then the other one just barely, just barely swings enough to release it, then it's possible that the clock will stop at some point. And that just means that this pendulum needs to be balanced a little bit. So if, for example, if this leg on the right is lifting way up like that, then you know then you know the whole pendulum is tilted too far to the left, like that. And so that can be changed. You can compensate for that by moving these. So if it's tilted too far down, like this, as it's swinging, then you move these to the right. And it's best to keep them in tandem with each other when you move them, because well, just so you know, if they get spread further apart, that will speed up the rate, actually speeds up the swing of the pendulum and makes the clock run faster. If you push these together, closer together, it slows it down. So that's another speed adjustment besides the one I just showed you, the little weight on the vertical, the lower point of the pendulum. But if you don't want it to run faster or slower than what it's currently running, when you adjust this, keep these, move them in tandem. So if it's swinging too far this way, then you would move them to the right a little bit, like that, and then just test it out. Check out these, how much they lift up. And now I got it. Now it's not balanced. You can see this one lifts way up high, way far away, and this one doesn't lift up nearly as much when it releases. Also, if the pendulum swings too far to the right, it can knock the frame right there. So if you see it knocking the frame as it's running, then you know that these two strings need to be moved to the left just slightly. And like you saw, I think you saw, just moving it a millimeter or two will make quite a bit of difference. I'm just going to scooch them a tiny bit to the left now to get it balanced again. So that's the balancing of the pendulum. There's one more part that is adjustable, and that's where the pendulum is suspended, and that's right up in here. There are these two strings that it hangs from, one in the front here and then one in the back here. And you can turn this knob here to the right or the left, and you can see it's raising or lowering this piece here is bringing it down or up, and that's kind of tilting the pendulum. In this plane, it's tilting it forward or backward like that. It just, so I can adjust it so that this piece here is basically horizontal, is where it should be. But that's always an adjustment on all my clocks. And on some, it's more essential because, you know, they're part of the pendulum might be running close to something else, and you need to be able to move it like this, front or back, to adjust it. On this clock, it's not much of an issue at all. So it'll already be in the right spot there, and you probably will never, I don't foresee you would ever need to move it. The other thing is when you're moving the clock, or when you're initially setting it up, I had that, I showed in the other video, there was a rubber band that just held the pendulum in rigidly in one position. And the clock should be hung up first before removing that rubber band. What that does is it prevents it from going like this. You can see these strings have got slack in them, and if it gets, you know, out of position, like if this, it's hard to explain in a way. Let me put the camera down here. You can see the string goes up through that slot. So if I wanted to take the pendulum off, I would bring the whole thing up here, and I'd pull this out of the slot like that. And now that one is released, and I would do the same to the one in the back. I'll just put this one back in the slot. There'd never be a need to remove the pendulum. But I'm just showing that if it's ever moved in the future, and let's say this is hanging down this way, now you can see it's got all this slack on the string and it's never going to run. So it has to be brought up above where that string is attached, and then to the left, and then back down like that. And it's just kind of cradled in there. So there's almost zero friction in the suspension of this pendulum. On old French clocks, that's called the silk thread suspension. It's done the same way, the same kind of method, with a string in the front and a string in the back. So that's just a bit of a tutorial on the basic running of the clock. And then lubrication is essentially permanent lubrication. First of all, it's in the wood itself in places. Like these escapement pallets here that catch the teeth each time are made of lignum vitae, which is one of the hardest woods in the world and is self-lubricating. So it's permeated with its own natural oils, and it will last a very, very long time and resists wear that way. And then in the pivots, like right here, this little pivot here that turns, that is also lignum vitae, and it's also lubricated with graphite. So you might see that it's got a kind of a shiny metallic look, and that's just powdered graphite that's rubbed onto it. And the same with the center shaft of the pendulum that goes through the frame of the clock. That's also lubricated with graphite. The only time that I mentioned that it may be necessary to lubricate is if you're in an extremely humid climate. And I'm not sure what your climate is where you are. I sell a lot of clocks on the east coast of the United States where it can get extremely humid, and that can cause some kind of drag right here on this surface. You can see as it's running, this will sort of skim along the outer edge when this pallet comes down. And if in very humid weather, the surface just develops some more friction. It's kind of just a stickiness, and that can slow down the pendulum. So, I would tell people if they notice the pendulum is not swinging as far and they just barely release as it's running on each side, they just barely let that wheel turn, then it may be that this needs lubrication. And I recommend using, I just use spray silicone. I spray it on some kind of applicator like a cotton swab, and I put it on this outer surface all the way around. And it can go on the pallet there too, but mostly on that outer surface. And that that gets it running more smoothly, and you eliminate some of that friction in humid weather. But you may never need to do that. That's simply done as needed. So, now I will get the clock packed up and ready for shipment.